Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Change into digital champions to save the digital world.
The game has been rigged, forget all the rules. Stop believing what you're told. All this hate that I feel for you, my one true enemy. Once was blind, but now I see. It makes me question why.
You know, as someone who's a big fan of Digimon, you'd think that'd be not something I was into, since I like Pokemon, because back in the day, I don't know, these kind of monster collecting franchises were pretty much kind of at war with each other. Now, no one could stop the dominance of Pokemon. The explosion back in the late 90s was absolutely out of control. It was everywhere. But the monster collecting genre is just that, a genre. And Digimon's often been looked at by people who just don't know as a ripoff of Pokemon. Maybe that's because of the similar names, but the truth is, outside of having the monster collecting formula and evolution lines, they don't really have that much in common, at least in terms of practice. Digimon also didn't start as a game in a traditional sense, not a typical video game. I mean, it was a game, but not the... Let me try to explain. Digimon, like Pokemon, started in Japan, but its first incarnation was in these little virtual pet handheld things. Basically, they were Tamagotchis. Similar concept, they were just Digimon instead. You carried them around with you, and you took care of them, and fed them, and played with them, and, you know, the little regular Tamagotchi stuff. If you use a Tamagotchi, you know what the Digimon toys were probably like. That exploded into something that was very popular, an actual franchise. It spawned a successful anime, toys, and of course, video games. But the thing about Digimon compared to Pokemon is that Pokemon games, generally speaking, are very good. Even the ones that the fan base complains about, let's be completely fair here. Even the worst generation of Pokemon is still a totally serviceable game. They're still good games. Digimon isn't like this, though. Digimon's had a really bad track record with video games overall, if I'm being completely honest. Out of all the Digimon games, there are only a handful that even come close to being decent, let alone good. The first one that I ever played was Digimon World 1 on the PlayStation, and it was basically just taking the Tamagotchi style and putting it into a PlayStation game, and that's a problem. Because by that point, especially in America, we've been exposed to the show, and we like the whole idea of battling and adventuring, and of course we were used to Pokemon. Digimon World didn't work like that at all. Honestly, it was pretty much just taking care of the Digimon and watching it grow. Now, if you're really into that idea, I guess it isn't the worst thing in the world, but for me personally, I really could not get my head around this. I legitimately wanted a proper RPG, you know, adventure kind of game. Digimon World 2 did grant my wish, at least partially, by introducing the concept of triple battles, which were awesome, a whole bunch of different Digimon to raise as opposed to just the one, and an actual expansive plot with a decent story and characters to get to know and understand. But it wasn't perfect either. Its problem was twofold. The level up system was garbage, forcing you to DNA digivolve, combining your Digimon in order to get past artificial level caps. This basically amounted to treating your Digimon partners that you're supposed to grow and bond with as just parts and pieces to be interconnected and recycled into new forms. It just didn't feel like a proper monster collecting game when, I mean, let's be fair, compared to Pokemon, where you can keep your starter Pokemon the whole time and grow and change and learn with your partner. Digimon World 2 just didn't have this. It didn't feel that way because the Digimon were quite literally just tools when it came to the actual growth mechanics. Plus, the dungeon crawling was not my speed. I could not get my head around it, and it felt like more padding than anything. Some people may have enjoyed it, but not so much me. Then again, I did play Digimon World 2 more than any other Digimon game when I was young, so, like I said, they did get some things right. The music and the graphics were great, and I did genuinely love that triple battle system. Naturally, Digimon World 3 came along, and you'd think they would have improved everything, but no, they ruined everything. On its surface, Digimon World 3 seems like a more classic JRPG setup, with a proper turn-based system and everything, but it's so full of nonsense, padding, and grind. That's all the game is, repeatedly, over and over again. Every quest you do feels like a complete waste of time. Very few have to do with the main plot, and Digimon growth is agonizingly slow. The point is, they just can't seem to get this right. Digimon World 4 wasn't even Digimon World 4 in Japan. Figure that one out. And even into the 2000s, and up until now, there still aren't that many Digimon games that are legitimately great. There are a few that were fun enough, but nothing that was truly outstanding. And we got one of the worst ever Digimon games that I've ever seen in my life, Digimon Masters Online, which is an MMORPG, which you'd think would be awesome, but no. It is, in fact, the worst MMO I have ever had the displeasure of playing. Don't you dare ask me to review that game. I will find you. So the point is that when it comes to proper video games, Digimon is pretty lackluster overall, especially when compared to other franchises like Pokemon. But there is at least one of them that stands out as arguably the greatest Digimon game ever made, and a legitimately great game on its own merits. Even putting aside the fact that it's a good Digimon game, it's a great game. That is Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. A proper JRPG fare, introducing triple battles from Digimon World 2 that I loved, but combining it with a proper JRPG setup, no more dungeon crawling or anything like that, and an actual concrete story with lovable characters and seriously engaging mechanics. The graphics and sound are phenomenal, especially considering that this was originally released for the PlayStation Vita, as well as the PS4 on March 12, 2015. Since then, it's been ported to several other platforms, including PC, as well as the Switch, and no matter which form you play it in, it's a phenomenal experience. The plot centers around your avatar character, which can be a boy or a girl, who suddenly finds themselves in the middle of this mess between the digital world and the real world, which sounds like a typical Digimon fare, but they introduce these weird creatures called Eaters that don't belong to either world. They aren't Digimon, and all they know how to do is consume data. The Eaters have something to do with this social media-like digital scape called Eden, which is kind of the catalyst for there being a connection to the digital world at all. And if an Eater touches a user who's in Eden, it sucks up their mental data, and their real body gets put into a coma. It's got some relation to things like .hack in that regard, if I'm being honest. Really, if you die in the game, you die for real. Although, at least in this case, people aren't dying in the game necessarily, but they are losing, basically, themselves, and their bodies are left to wither away. It's a pretty serious tale in that regard, but what I love about it is how many side stories there are. Cyber Sleuth has a lot of different emotional spectrums to throw in your face, and all of it is good. There's plenty of funny moments, there's plenty of happy moments, there's plenty of awesome moments, and there's plenty of really dark moments. And I want to warn you about that, it's not gory. Most of it is implication, but there's plenty of horror to be found in Cyber Sleuth as well. In that regard, it touches almost every base when it comes to what people want to expect from a JRPG, or any RPG for that matter. It has multiple different story tangents, and all of it is good. The supporting cast is quite hilarious. I am a big fan of Nokia because she's out of her mind, and she never fails to make me laugh because she just can't stop doing something ridiculous at any given moment. There's also Kyoko, who's the reason why you're called a Cyber Sleuth. You are her assistant and you work for her detective agency. The source of the quests have to do with different jobs you're given from people who are sending requests to the detective agency. The jobs vary wildly in terms of what people want you to do, and again, that's usually where the different sort of emotional issues come from. And a quest you might think starts out pretty dumb can wind up being pretty dark pretty quick, or sometimes just genuinely wholesome or heartfelt. The storytelling in Cyber Sleuth is legitimately good, but you want to hear about the gameplay. The story is a big part of the RPG. I don't want to spoil too much about Cyber Sleuth's tale for you, but the gameplay is where things line up. I already mentioned there's triple battles, and that's true, but it doesn't work like Digimon World 2 in that regard, mostly because there's really no level cap. There are, but they're very easy to get around and don't involve DNA digivolving forcibly and treating your partners as just, products to be used. In this game, you legitimately can use your starting Digimon and level them all the way up. You just have to get around certain hurdles to get there, because it's not just a 1 to 99 level up system. Naturally, they had to make it at least a little bit weird, because Digimon games love making level up systems a little bit weird. In this case, it's actually more accurate to proper Digimon lore, in that Digimon are capable of evolving backwards. You can go down to a lower form. If you've seen any episode of the anime, you probably already know that. And that's generally very important when it comes to leveling up, because there are certain stats that can only be gained by doing this exact thing. The evolutionary paths in Digimon are not locked off. It's more of a spectrum, and there are certain limits, but not as many as you'd think. The Digimon you're using gain moves based off of whatever evolution they take, and they can carry those moves forward or backward with them as they switch to new forms. This is very relevant when it comes to building a team, as you might want a team that has a different variety of different moves. This is the best way to do that. There's also a type system within Cyber Sleuth, not dissimilar from Pokemon, in that certain Digimon just have different strengths and weaknesses. Certain types are just stronger against other types, and sometimes you are at a disadvantage based on the weaknesses you have. You're also not limited to 3 members in your party. It is possible to increase your party's memory and carry more Digimon with you. If your first team of 3 gets wiped out, you can have another team of 3 right behind them and put them forward. That sounds like it makes the game easier. Well, it does, but not in the sense of making it too easy, because there's some fights where you legitimately will need that many Digimon to deal with whatever you're fighting. Some of these battles are really hard, especially if you're playing on the hardest difficulty where you really absolutely need to do this. Also, I just like having a team of 6, frankly, because I'm a Pokemon fan, so of course teams of 6 are kind of resonate with me a little bit. There's also the Digimon Islands, which are places where you can put your Digimon when you're not using them in battle, where they can also gain passive experience just by being there. Kinda like the Pokemon Daycare Center, except you don't have to pay for this, and you can put a ton of Digimon in it. You can make the islands larger and have the Digimon do specific tasks if you want, but there's a whole bunch of Digimon to get in the game. And though you can get most of them by just going through the Digivolution lines, you can also capture them. The capture system works by basically just fighting them. That's all you have to do, is get into battle with one, and you get a certain percentage of the capture rate. Once you do, you can literally just make the Digimon in the Digilab, and then you have them. There's no capture system in the sense of where you literally do that. In this case, it's all data, where you can actually just copy it. The battle system is about what you'd expect from a typical turn-based system, except they list the order of attackers on the right-hand side, which is very convenient. Thank you for that. Beyond that, though, if you've played an older Final Fantasy game, you probably know how this works. The only thing that's different, I would say, is the combo system, which I still don't fully understand exactly how that builds or when it happens. It seems to be just kind of a chancy thing. The higher your combo rate, the more likely it is to happen, and it gives your attacks a boost. But again, it's a bit down to luck in that regard. There isn't much of a skill involved with building a combo, in my opinion. You don't really need it to progress that much, but it is something else to note. In terms of moving around the overworld, whether you're in Eden somewhere or in the real world, there are puzzles to solve, people to talk to, items to buy, the general RPG fare, but everything is really, really nice. It's fun to explore and look around and talk to people. It doesn't do anything too fancy compared to a typical role-playing game, but I think that's why it's so good. It does what we come to expect from the genre, and does it really, really well. It doesn't go completely outlandish with it or get super experimental or attempt to do something too weird. It's exactly what you would expect from a proper turn-based JRPG. But that's exactly why it's good. Because, frankly, we just don't get a lot of the typical JRPGs anymore. They've all been weird. So, for one thing, old school people like me who love the turn-based setup like older Final Fantasy games are starved of this genre. A. B. Digimon always felt the need to make it at least a little bit weird. This is the first time I'm aware of where they did it and didn't make it so awkward. It just does what it does and does it well. And in that way, it's actually a great experience. It's carried forward by the outstanding writing and the characters and the genuinely fun, if not a bit simple, gameplay. If you love Digimon, you're gonna love this. And if it sounds like I love the game a bit too much, and I probably do, don't worry. It's not perfect, and I'll tell you what the flaws are. The big issue I have with the game, more than anything else, is the requirements for Digivolution. Whenever you Digivolve, it's not just what level you have to be at in order to do it. It also takes into account pretty much every single one of your Digimon stats. And generally speaking, the higher the level you're going, the higher the stats have to be. And the stats aren't always exactly what you'd expect based on the level. It is possible, if not more likely, that you will get to the required level you need to Digivolve, but still be short 1 or 2 stats that need to be higher. How do you raise these? Well, naturally, you have to go all the way back down again and level up again. You get boosts to these stats based on which forms you've taken and how many times you've Digivolved. Then there's Abby, and I hate Abby so much, which stands for ability. There is literally only one way to raise this stat. That is, in itself, Digivolving. That's it. That's how you do it. There are very expensive items that can do this too, apparently, but very expensive, like I said. What that means, basically, is that you are forced, I repeat, forced, to level up your Digimon. Digivolve them to the point where you have to stop because you can't go any further. Then, once you do that, go all the way back down, and then do it all over again until the Abby stat is where you need it to be. It is the one element of Cyber Sleuth that I can't stand because it is in fact a grind. It's a pain in the butt. It's designed to keep you from having too many powerful Digimon too early in the game, and I get that, but hey, how about you just don't do that to us? How about that? No? Okay, fine. Be that way. And even if you can get around Abby, some of your other stats may still be too low, and that can be really frustrating when you're trying to get a specific Digimon that you really desperately want. The evolution lines are a lot more complex than you'd think. They look pretty simple, but once you factor in the stat requirements, things can get a little out of hand pretty quick. And I can see it frustrating a lot of players. But then again, you can get through the game without getting to the mega levels. It is possible to have just a bunch of really strong ultimates. So, you know, I'll take it. And as angry as I sound, it is a minor issue. It is not something that I consider a game breaker at all. Cyber Sleuth is, in my opinion, the best Digimon game ever made, period, end of story, and I would love to see them make more in this exact style. Although, to be fair, technically speaking, my wish has already been granted. Digimon Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory is, I was about to say sequel. That's not quite right. It's more of a sidequel, co-story to the main story. It takes place during the events of Cyber Sleuth, but it involves a different character, the unnamed hacker, or the hero, as he's sometimes called. In this game, there's no gender decision. The hacker is always male, which might be a bit disappointing to female fans, or guys that just like playing as girls, whatever, I ain't judging. But don't underestimate it based on that. Hacker's Memory is great. It's a wonderful game, absolutely solid experience, especially if you got through the entirety of Cyber Sleuth and wanted more, like I did. Hacker's Memory is right there. Just as long of experience with a different story that's tied to the story you already grew to love. In terms of battle mechanics and things like that, it's pretty much the same exact game in that regard. The only difference is there's a few new Digimon as well as the different story and new characters. Sometimes characters that you recognize from Cyber Sleuth do show up, but generally you'll be focusing on the new characters, and dealing with the overall plot of the Cyber Sleuth universe from their perspective and their position during the events. It's still genuinely good though, just as good as the first Cyber Sleuth. The writing in these games is definitely worth it just based on that. Even if the level up system does drive you nuts because of the stat requirements, I still implore you to give it a try, just based off these stories. And what's even better is generally both these games are sold together now, in the form of Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Complete Edition. It's the two games in one, and that effectively amounts to a minimum of 80 hours of game time in one solid package. So I would say it's absolutely worth it to get the games. They are two of my favorite RPGs ever, and definitely my favorite Digimon games ever. This is the exact kind of game that Digimon has needed for a long time, and what I desperately wish is for Bandai Namco to at least try to do this again. It feels like ever since these, they have decided to do weird and experimental stuff, and that can work sometimes, but sometimes it's also better to do what everyone is familiar with. That's what Cyber Sleuth did. It didn't get too weird with it. It just did what every other JRPG has done since the original Final Fantasy or so. But people know that, and it's something Digimon hadn't been able to do or accomplish well. Cyber Sleuth handles it phenomenally, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. I know there's been new Digimon games since Cyber Sleuth, like Survive, and I'm kind of a little bit interested in Survive, but I haven't played it just yet. And then there's also the mobile games. You know, the worst part about the mobile games for me is that Bandai Namco actually made two initially, and by two I mean one, but then decided that one, despite actually being good, and I know this because I played it, it wasn't worth keeping around. So they deleted it entirely and replaced it with something new. And then that didn't work out. So they deleted that entirely, and then just replaced it with the Watch. You know, the Watch app. Except then, they deleted the Watch app and replaced it with an all-in-one Watch app, which adds the Kamen Rider stuff onto it too, and it's way worse than the original one. I do not know what their deal is with just deleting stuff. And this is the problem with digital media that you have to remember, especially with phones. I play a lot of phone games, and I don't mind phone games. What I do mind is the fact that they're always intrinsically linked linked to a server. And if that server is ever turned off, the game is dead. You can't play it anymore. It literally gets deleted into the ether. Those two Digimon games that I think actually were pretty good for what they were, that were originally on phones, yeah, you can never play them ever again. They are literally gone. We didn't used to have this problem. Anyway, back to Cyber Sleuth though. That's great, it's wonderful, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.